Opinions and views expressed on this podcast are for informational purposes and do not constitute therapy, clinical advice, or psychiatric diagnosis, and should not be used as a basis for medical or health-related decisions.
There was a time when I believed in humanity, and that time is long gone. Many things have changed, and I was forced to believe only.
Hostiles inbound. We're under attack. We're losing ground. Air support inbound.
Welcome to Mind Maps, where we survey the psyche and navigate the mental terrain of modern actions and attitudes. I'm your host, Hadrun. I've got my co-pilot Ulf here in the cockpit with me for this pilot episode, and we're mapping minds over at Free Folk Works. To learn more about who we are and what we do, head on over to freefolk.org. To learn more about this podcast, visit freefolk.org/works. What do we have lined up for this first episode, Ulf?
Well, for our first episode, we're going to be talking about the Alpha Dawn phenomenon and how our 47th president, Donald Trump, fits into the archetype of the alpha male.
That's an exciting topic, and I think a lot of our listeners out there are going to be interested to hear our perspectives on this. So, what is the Alpha Dawn phenomenon, and what effect is it having on the minds of the masses? That's what we're going to focus on as part of this pilot episode. So why don't we start with what is an alpha?
Okay, so for an alpha, we're going to have to define our male dominance hierarchy the way the Free Folk uses it. So this is based on Vox Day's social-sexual hierarchy from about a decade or more ago. And the primary difference is that we define each in terms of their motivations rather than how they are perceived from the outside. So in our model of the hierarchy, the alpha is motivated to be in the dominant position in any social interaction. That does not mean that they're the best qualified in any endeavor, with the exception of keeping the remainder of the group in line and focused on his mission. Now, there's two subdivisions of the alpha personality. One is the benevolent alpha, who attains and maintains his position of social dominance via making alliances, rewarding loyalty, and such. He brings his capable and loyal people with him and displays loyalty towards them. Then we have the narcissistic alpha. This is the one that attains and maintains his position through the use of fear and taking advantage of others. He sees everyone as a threat and will generally not promote or retain anyone who's too competent for fear that they may usurp him.
And I think I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, I think we've all had experience of these two types of alpha personalities that you're describing, whether it's been in our interpersonal relationships, our professional relationships. We've all encountered both of those types. And I know you're going to get into the full hierarchy and the other rungs, as well as, I believe, one outlier as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, the narcissistic alpha is what a lot of people think of as simply the alpha. It's been demonized quite a bit in the red pill community by opponents of that, but we're not talking about it from that point of view. But we do have to acknowledge that both the narcissistic and the benevolent alpha do exist. And we'll get into some of the, positives and negatives when you talk specifically about Donald Trump of the alpha personality, because it's not all good or all negative. So the next step on the rung, or the next rung on the ladder, so to speak, is the beta. This term has been grossly misused on the internet. The beta is the team player. Okay, they're motivated by two primary goals. They want to accomplish a mission, and they want to do it in a way that best benefits all members of the team. It's important to note that accomplishing the mission is the first and foremost in his mind, and he understands and is willing to do so to the detriment of individual members of the team if necessary. The beta is usually just as capable of leading as an alpha, but prefers to stay in the secondary role. A good example of this is if you have a ship. Okay, the alpha is going to be the captain of the ship. The beta will be the executive officer. He's in charge of executing the captain's orders and keeping the rest of the crew in line and on mission. That's not the captain's job.
Right. I think a lot of people forget that, or they conflate that. So, yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
And, a way to think about the difference between the two is we can look to popular media like movies. So someone who generally is promoted as that would be the benevolent alpha type would be like John Wayne in his cowboy movies. Okay. Or even in his war movies. He's the dominant in the situation. He's giving the orders and expects his people to follow him. His number two implements those orders, keeps people in line. Another good example of the beta, and most people will confuse him with being an alpha in this role, is Mel Gibson in We Were Soldiers. Okay, where he plays Colonel Hal Moore, who's in charge of a battalion. He is the top dog in the field of the battalion. However, he is the beta because, first of all, he's implementing the general's orders. The general is the actual alpha in this situation. And he obsesses through the whole movie about keeping as many of his men alive while still accomplishing the mission. It's very much the beta mindset, not the alpha mindset.
Right. And I know, I'm sorry. Go ahead, continue.
So a beta with a very dominant personality can easily be mistaken as an alpha, even though he's not.
Okay. And I know some folks, especially in the red pill community, prefer the term Bravo to beta because of some of the negative perspectives that people have taken with respect to that term, beta male. So I've heard the term Bravo used as well to describe this second in command, this executive officer type personality. Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, to do that, to be consistent, Bravo follows the military when you're enunciating letters out, Alpha, Bravo,
right, the call
Charlie,
signs.
Delta,
yeah.
As we would have to basically relabel the entire hierarchy, because the way that hierarchy is labeled now is it goes by the Greek alphabet.
The Greek. Mm-hmm.
So
sure.
Here's the free folk. We're going to keep calling them the beta, even though the kind of smooth brains that are just destroying the red pill community. Basically, they mistake what they call the beta is actually the omega.
Right.
And we'll get into what the omega is in a few minutes here.
Saving that for last, where it belongs, right?
Yeah, they're the bottom. Yep.
Okay, please continue.
So the next rung is the delta. The delta is your everyman. It's your everyday working man, your normal dude is the delta. His primary goal is to do a good job at whatever they're currently engaged in. That's whether it's work or leisure. They're not typically inclined towards or interested in leadership. They're the good soldiers. They're the backbone of the army or the business or whatever. They're the workaday man. They believe in the hierarchy and they believe in their place in it. So, this can be anything from your factory worker to your rank and file policeman, anything. Your clerk at the post office is going to be a delta. Now, some people get a negative view of this because everyone wants to glamorize the alpha and / beta personalities. the delta is the majority of people in a population, and it has to be that way. Things will not work if everybody's an alpha or a beta. You have to have the majority of people being a delta. Nothing wrong with it. These are going to be the guys that you kind of have the stereotypical picture of, where they're standing around in their sandals, their Bermuda shorts, and their salmon polo tops around the new Weber gas grill that one of them bought, and they're talking about the new socket set they bought or the new supercharger they're putting in their car. Whatever the thing is. The normal guys, this is them. They don't really stand out a whole lot in any way, but everybody depends on them, and there's nothing wrong being the delta.
Right. They're the salt of the earth, so to speak.
Absolutely. That's a great phrase. Yes.
Yeah.
Salt of the earth. Then we come to the problem children. First of which is the gamma. Gamma is the one of the two toxic rungs on the hierarchy. They can be summed up as the smart loser. They envision themselves as the most capable and intellectually brightest of the bunch. They usually are of above average intelligence and are competent at what they do, sometimes to the extreme. However, they have an abject fear of failure and will go out of their way to avoid being put in a position of responsibility, while in a state of constant criticism of those around them who are making them generally miserable to be around, resulting in them rarely rising to any position of importance.
Oh,
so
and I
this
think
is the guy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yes, we have plenty of examples of this. Everyone knows this guy. He's the guy who you work alongside, and he has every excuse on why management is stupid. They don't know how to do their job. He could do it better, but then will vigorously run away from any attempts at giving that person responsibility.
Right. These are also the types that do not take accountability for their actions. I've encountered these types both in my personal life and my professional life, and they will always try to deflect or look for somebody else to assign that responsibility to. They tend to be underminers and saboteurs of otherwise good crews and good groups. Unfortunately.
Correct. And they can be very difficult to deal with because they do tend to be of high intelligence, and they're also competent at their undermining as much as they are, doing what their job is supposed to be.
Right. And this is within, just to be clear for our folks listening out there, we're talking about males here. We're talking about the male dominance hierarchy. So the gamma, I think, at least in my experience from what I've observed, this is the one that behaves in what we would call a cognitively feminine manner, correct?
He's one of them. You can make an argument that the other problem child also does so.
Okay. We're going to get a little bit deeper into that as you continue. All right.
But yes, this is definitely a cognitively female personality. And of course, one of our upcoming episodes is going to be more defining that the aspects of the cognitively female versus the cognitively male way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So our second problem child is the omega. So if the gamma is the smart loser, the omega is the dumb loser. They're generally incapable, often of subpar intelligence, and can often be the monkey wrench in any endeavor. They can also be toxic, and they will often try to rise in the hierarchy, not by increasing their competence, but by attaching themselves as a lackey to someone higher up than they are, and will undermine and betray others to attempt to climb the proverbial ladder. So the omega will often try to attach to a narcissistic alpha. And we all know who this is. This is the guy who can't do anything, but they keep him around, and he's kept in a position where he can undermine, and I shouldn't say undermine because he's not smart enough to undermine. He's incompetent.
The useful idiot? Is this a useful idiot?
It's the useful idiot. The gamma can also be used as the useful idiot for the narcissistic alpha, but the omega is the person we all know as the ass kisser.
Ah, yes.
So they can't really do anything except kiss a good ass, and they're kept around for that reason, basically.
Got it.
And they're somewhat pitiable in that they genuinely do not have capability. They may be of low intelligence. They're not skilled at the job they're trying to do and should probably do something else. But, this is what they want to do. And here's where we're coming to arguing that it could be cognitively female because they're following on their emotions rather than taking a more objective look at what they're actually capable of and trying to redirect their efforts in that direction.
Yeah, and the aggressive types can be particularly problematic. I mean, whether they are actively aggressive, in the form of engaging in, criminal behavior, even violent criminal behavior. Particularly those, they'll prey on those weaker than themselves, women, children, pedophile types, that sort of thing. And then there's also the passive aggressive. They'll engage in the feminine forms of violence, rather, where they're undermining and manipulating and sabotaging and poisoning and that sort of thing.
Yes, and that's where you really get into the cognitively female thinking when you get into the passive aggressive omega.
Right, and then we've all seen that too, and I've noticed just since we've had social media, it has really brought out the worst in these cognitively feminine males. You'll see them behave. I know you're going to get deeper into this as we discuss further, but you really see them behave like, I'll just say, bitchy little adolescent girls on social media. And this is not something we would have seen in the past, certainly not as prevalently as we've seen since the advent of social media.
Correct. And that's largely because over social media, there's little to no consequence for their actions.
Right.
Whereas, in real life, in meat life, as some like to say it, the omega tends to get quickly checked.
Yes.
So the final element of the male dominance hierarchy is the outlier, is someone who is outside of the hierarchy, and that is the sigma. So we left the sigma for last because they are in fact outliers. They have their own internal motivations. This can sometimes be called an autotelic personality. And they both do not see themselves as part of a hierarchy, nor do they have any inclination to join or be forced into one. They're generally seen as the equal to an alpha in both competence and a desire to dominate. The difference is the sigma doesn't want to dominate the social situation. They want to achieve maximum personal agency to dominate their life. The sigma is very much a foil to the alpha, especially the narcissistic alpha, though neither type of alpha, the benevolent or the narcissistic, take the sigma's refusal to acknowledge them as the top of the hierarchy very well. The sigma, because of their competence, dominant personality, and ability to get their way by either circumventing a hierarchy or directly confronting it, often gets them mistaken for alphas. However, the sigma neither seeks to achieve nor even wants followers, and instead they prefer to work with fellow agential people as necessary. So, yeah, this is the guy who will often work outside of a company. He'll be a contractor and it'll be his job to come in and implement something, and he will not care who he offends within the hierarchy. Schmo is the vice president of this division. Well, this is how we're supposed to. This is what I've been charged to implement. This is how we're doing it. And I have orders from your higher up who have hired me to do this and have given me free rein to do that. Too bad if you don't like it. He doesn't care.
He's not part of the tribe. Yeah. He's
correct.
Not part of the tribe.
And he doesn't care if the lower people on the hierarchy don't like the fact that he's adding to their workload or don't like the way he's implementing this because they're going to have to work in that manner. Doesn't care. His mission is, this is my career as a contractor. I get what I want by being excellent at my job, and it doesn't matter if you people like me or not.
Right. And within trifunctionalism, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, and within trifunctionalism, which is another part of the free folk system, and this is something we've talked about on other podcasts that we have appeared, and groups that we've made presentations to, and it's something I'm certain we're going to get deeper into on mind maps. But within the trifunctional system that we observe, the sigma almost always, correct me if I'm wrong, is a first function type, right? And those who occupy the second and third function, which is really where the hierarchy is, that's where a group hierarchy exists. They don't understand the first function outlier, the sigma outlier, and sometimes there's some friction there as a consequence of that, because they don't understand that sigma is not part of the hierarchical group structure.
Correct. And a lot of times the mistake they're making is they think that the first function is putting themselves above everyone else because
in the hierarchy, right? In the hierarchy.
Right, because they don't conform to the hierarchy. So they think they're putting themselves above everyone in the hierarchy, not understanding that the reason they don't conform to the hierarchy is they're not in it at all.
Correct.
So they're not above anyone. They're not below anyone. They're off to the side.
Right.
Another good, way to put this is George Patton's, famous phrase: "Lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way."
Very well said.
In our trifunctionalism, quickly, just to quickly reiterate, in our trifunctionalism, second function leads, third function follows, first function gets the hell out of the way.
Yes, very well said. Very well said.
So did you have other questions to ask before we start moving into the big D?
No, thank you very much for giving us that brief but very comprehensive overview of the male dominance hierarchy and how we observe it within the free folk and how many others observe it in the red pill community as well. Now let's move on. Let's get on to the business of the big D. Big D.
Okay. So moving on to our 45th and 47th president, Donald Trump, also known as the big D laying on the table in the room. Okay. Donald Trump is a benevolent alpha. And here's why. Myself and others who've grown up in New England, especially the older folks like myself, Gen X, have been exposed to Donald Trump for decades. He's a well-known quantity to us. And it's well known that he quickly establishes dominance in any situation. It can be in an interview, a business negotiation, or just you catch him talking on the side of the street. He will quickly establish his dominance in that situation. So yes, socially, in business, in just everyday conversation, I can imagine, sitting around for family dinner that the rest of his family probably didn't get a word in edgewise until he asked them something. So he takes, whatever means to maintain the dominant position, regardless of the perceptions or disapproval of others. We've seen him do this through, in debates, he'll make little quips as the other person is speaking, or he'll do a little aside. He'll be talking about a subject, do a little aside to just poke at somebody. And it's establishing his dominant position within the discussion at hand, the situation at hand.
Another way of putting that, as I have heard, is controlling the frame. He always controls the frame, right?
Correct. And if you try to deviate from his frame, he will bring it right back immediately, including breaking the rules of formal debate and talking over the other person.
Right.
This can rub people the wrong way. And again, I'll keep emphasizing this. The alpha doesn't care.
Right.
You can be as mad as you want at him as long as you let him be the dominant person.
Yeah, he did. I was going to say he doesn't seek approval or validation. That is not part of his motive.
Correct. And the reason an alpha in general, and him in particular, sees it that way is he understands he's at the top. There is no one to answer to. So the alpha understands this position, and it really rubs some people the wrong way who think they should be able to influence the person at the top's interactions with others.
Well, I think it's because he doesn't fall into the ego box, the ego trap, if you will, that folks on the lower rungs tend to. And again, the farther down the hierarchy we go, the more cognitively feminine, and therefore the more feminine in orientation, and the more the ego becomes something that they're trying to satisfy or gratify, rather, with the approval seeking and the validation seeking. So you can kind of see that spectrum playing itself out there.
Correct. And the alpha, and in many ways the sigma, being at the top of their respective hierarchy or lack thereof, is the most masculine because it inherently requires them to establish and maintain the order of what they're trying to do.
Right.
And as we all know, or maybe we don't all know, but philosophically, the male represents order, the female represents chaos. So the lower down on the rungs you get, the more chaos you get, the more feminine thinking you get. Higher up on the ladder, the more ordered thinking, the more ordered and established control of both oneself and the situation in general that you'll find.
Correct.
Okay. Now he shows
Great
that he's
stuff.
a genuine.
Continue. Yeah, please.
Certainly. He shows he's a genuine alpha and that his dominance and success is the only metric he measures himself by. Okay. And his complete disregard for the ill perceptions or even open dislike of others is because he views them as beneath him. Okay, this can't be emphasized enough. He understands his position. And he understands everyone beneath him is a potential adversary. So even if someone is allied with him today, he understands that tomorrow that person can be an adversary and will have a plan to deal with that.
So he doesn't have many friends, I take it, because he can't. His position doesn't allow for that, right?
The alpha simply can't have a lot of friends.
Yeah, can't afford it.
And that's one of the downsides that we'll get into later of being an alpha.
Yeah, I mean, I've observed before in public discourse and private, for that matter, that all true folk, what I would call agential folk, can have only temporary alliances, and it's for this reason that you cite. So thank you for bringing that up.
Correct. Another thing he has here, he's got a reputation for his entire public life of being able to accurately identify competence of those under him and grooming them for positions they fit the best and rewarding them for competence and loyalty. So in his business dealings, he's been known to promote people from within. He gets to know the people under him, and he will put them into positions where they genuinely will do well. This isn't to be mistaken for him being soft on people. He's doing it because it's the best way to accomplish his mission. However, this does place him in the slot being the benevolent alpha, because he understands that grooming these people to be in the proper position, helping get them educated, giving them the tools they need to operate best in this position they're good at, helps him.
It's what I call the win-win-win, right? The win-win-win,
exactly.
The triple win. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. So it's a very smart tactic. It's also very good if you happen to be a person who's underneath him. He'll recognize your competence, even if you don't, and put you in the proper position. Now, of course, the converse of that is if you're not competent, he'll get rid of you very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you didn't grow up hearing about Donald Trump and the things he did, you can see exactly how he works this in his TV show that he did called The Apprentice.
Yes.
Because he worked with the prospective apprentices exactly this way. He found out what they're good at, and went through. And of course, it was the thing of this show that only one could come out at the end of the season. So you got all the Yafayats. But a lot of the people along the way were actually competent, and it was just an artifact of the show. They had to pick one. However, he's also been seen. I saw a live interview he was doing at the Trump Tower recently, and someone asked, what does it take to get hired on to do, the Trump Tower? And he just stopped the interview right there. He's like, "You guys don't mind if I do a business, an employment interview right here, do you?" And so he asked her, what are you good at? What do you do? What kind of position would you be looking for to work in, the Trump Tower? And she gave him a brief answer, and he just pointed over to his left and said, "This is the guy to talk to right over here." He brought her around, boom, and she and whoever he is, whatever his position was in the Trump organization, they went off and started talking, and he's like, "She seemed like a very nice person. Seems like she's probably pretty competent, and if the salary's right and her skills are right, she's hired." So he can assess and make decisions extremely quickly, which honestly is a very good trait to have in a leader of a nation.
I would argue that it's necessary.
Yes. Very few people have that ability at his level, but I don't know what his IQ is, but I imagine it's probably above 140.
Mm-hmm.
So he's up there, and it's kind of a relief to have someone who's that intelligent and capable of accurate decision making at a rapid pace. Now, here's a big one. He's clearly demonstrated an unflagging determination to achieve his goals. Okay. Throughout his career, he's had multiple bankruptcies, lawsuits with the government, with other businesses, from private people. He reached an economic low in his real estate business at one point of being at minus $900 million.
Wow.
Can you imagine being $900 million in the hole?
That's pretty far down in the hole.
Right. Now, none of that deterred him from continuing to move to achieve his goals, and he eventually hit a high of $10 billion.
Yeah.
So he took himself from being almost $1 billion into the hole to being positive $10 billion in the black, which is amazing.
That's incredible. Yeah, incredible.
I mean, most of us try to hey, maybe one point I can make $1 million at some point in our whole life, 1 million. And this dude has gone between lows and highs that the rest of us can't even imagine. And frankly, I doubt we could handle if we were even close to that.
No, that's a rare talent that we're observing there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then getting into his political career, in his first political run, he had to endure going from a media sweetheart. And I'm sure you remember this, being Gen X and where you live and all that. He was on Oprah. He was on the news.
Oh, yeah.
He was the darling of the media. They just swooned all over him whenever they interviewed him. He went from that to being stabbed in the back by both the media and former friends in brutal attempts at character assassinations. Okay? They did everything they could to take him down by smearing his name, bringing up his business dealings and trying to make him out to be this absolute monster. And the funny thing is in all the attempted, suits and investigations to try to, bring him up on felony charges, to try to smear his name, even his worst enemies admitted they couldn't come up with anything.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So
it's a good thing he's not approval seeking or validation seeking, because again, there's the ego trap that that other cognitively feminine types will try to trap people in. It's their go-to.
Absolutely. And a lot of people drop out of politics very quickly as soon as the smear campaigns start.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go through this. I don't want to bring my family through this. The Dawn was just damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
Yep.
So you could say it's admirable. You could say it's a little reckless. Again, he doesn't care. He had his goal of becoming president, and he did what he had to get there. The
point is that it works, and you have to respect it, whether you like it or not. you have to respect it.
Right. And just to, say it before the people say it, yes, he was recently convicted of several felonies. And ironically, this was very much like an Al Capone situation. They couldn't get him on the having documents because he was the president. He can declassify anything. So he could have documents at his home, whatnot. And his, business dealings, all this other stuff. It was, tax issues and stuff like that. They finally got him on. And the prosecutor, who's known for de-escalating charges of things like armed assault, assault and battery down to misdemeanor charges, raised what were misdemeanor charges to felony charges to try to keep him from running again. That's what happened.
It just goes to show how dangerous he is and how much of a threat he poses to his enemies.
Correct. And the fact that even after they basically ran him through a kangaroo court, he still won.
Right.
So that proves how dangerous he is too.
Mm-hmm.
So in his first, his first presidency, he was constantly under threat of character assassination. If they couldn't argue with his policies, they just, orange man bad, orange man dumb. And he's obviously not dumb because he run roughshod all over his enemies. Yeah, there was nothing they could do. His own party fought against him just as hard as the opposing party. And leaks and betrayal from within his own cabinet. I mean, he had his vice president undermining him. He had his defense secretary undermining him. His head of the CIA undermining him. So while a lot of people complained that he didn't get a whole lot done in his first presidency, he actually got quite a bit done, especially considering he was fighting literally everybody. So again, it's proving just how competent and dominant he is. Now, between presidencies, you would think, he's not president anymore, so things would let up. Oh, no. Again, he was continually attacked by both government and private sources. In the lead up to the 2024 election, at least 2 assassination attempts were made on him. There was a third where there was an armed person around. I don't believe they're calling that an assassination attempt because no shots were fired, but that could have been a third attempt. So despite all this, he continued his course, dominating the narrative and achieved victory in one of the largest landslides in election history. Now think about this. We all saw the video of it, right? Remember when he got shot? So he got shot. What would most people do? They'd be, screw it, I'm done, right? No. Right. What he did is he stood up as quickly as he could, despite Secret Service piling on top of him, raised his fist in the air, and yelled, "Fight, fight." And I believe a lot of the analysis from the politicos and whatnot were correct when they said the Democrat Party just won Donald Trump the election.
Yes.
I mean, how can that, even if you don't like the guy, if you don't like his policies and whatnot, how can you not admire someone who does that?
You can't.
And the image of the way the photographer did the image was perfect, right? He's down below him. He's looking up at him with his fist in the air, blood coming out, the side of his head, with the American flag flying above him. I mean, that was perfect composition. So,
some would argue too perfect.
Some would argue too perfect, but you know what? If that's the way it was, that was the situation, and boom, it was captured. Yeah. In my opinion, what that does is that shows the competence of the photographers that he hired to be able to get themselves into that position and make the shot that quickly.
Absolutely.
So again, putting the right people in the right place, and to use modern parlance, that's absolutely an alpha Chad move.
Totally.
So in his current presidency, we're here. We are here, aren't we?
We are here. 3 months
guys,
in. Yeah.
We're only 3 months in.
3 months in.
I would argue that he's shaken up both the country and the world as much in these 3 months as he did it in his entire first 4 years. So, despite antics from the opposition, ranging from the childish to the criminal, he not only dominates the U.S., but the world stage. Think about this. World policies were changed his first day in office. How often does that happen? Almost never. So no matter how much they hate him, the leaders of the world are forced to react to him and not he to them. He maintains the initiative, leaving even groups that formerly held immense power, such as the WHO and the WEF, World Health Organization, and World Economic Forum, scrambling. He didn't use these words, but when he first took office, he did not go to Davos, to the World Economic Forum. He called in and basically told him that they're not going to run the United States anymore. They're not going to dictate policy to the United States. He'd like to be there to tell them in person, but he's not going to be. And from here on out, basically they could kiss his ass because he's running the United States now.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at the same time, you have Europe doing the whole great weeping and gnashing of teeth thing about, oh my gosh, we have to follow the World Economic Forum. They're leading us into the future and all this. And he's like, yeah, kiss my ass. I got my own country to deal with.
Right.
So stark contrast between himself and other world leaders.
He doesn't bend the knee. Yeah, he doesn't bend the knee to these organizations.
Right, at all. And, immediately defunded the U.S. funding of the World Health Organization. And latest reports is they're having to seriously scale back their activities because they depended on so much on U.S. money being, the influx into them, that they're having to basically really restructure their entire operations because of him pulling out.
Oh, what a shame.
Oh, what a shame. But that's a huge influence.
Oh, yeah.
It cannot be denied. Now, like we said before, he has very few friends, both in the United States and elsewhere. We've seen evidence of, but not done directly, because he's smart enough that even some of his allies were not towing the line on the things that he wanted done, and quickly reversed their decisions for no known reason. So I'm sure there was behind the scenes calls being made by him that you are going to do this. We saw the very interesting turnaround in Congress of the speaker not really going along with Donald Trump. What was it? The leader of the Senate not really going along with Donald Trump. And then when we were having the votes, particularly the one that J.D. Vance had to cast the tiebreaker on, so yeah, now all of a sudden they're more cooperative. Or when Congress was in session with their little auction paddles, and the Speaker of the House, who had signaled that he was going to oppose a lot of Donald Trump's plans and policies and whatnot, all of a sudden is turning around and having disruptive members thrown out physically of the building. So, yes, it shows that even people who are supposed to be on his side, who are allies, they're not his friends, and he has to keep them in line. Yeah.
No, that's always the case. I mean, the captain of the ship can't afford that.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So when you're in private or whatever, you can bitch all you want about it, but when we're at work, we're accomplishing the mission, whatever it is, no, you got to do what you're told.
Yeah. And it's difficult. I mean, just to segue a little bit here into the psychology, and we're going to start getting into the psychology here in the next segment of this episode. A lot of people have difficulty compartmentalizing if they have a friendship with somebody, and then they're also in a business relationship with that person. It's very difficult for most people to separate between the two, and they can't compartmentalize. So what ends up happening is if the business relationship sours for whatever reason, or that needs to be terminated, by one party for whatever reason, the friendship often is sacrificed as a consequence because one or both parties just can't compartmentalize and keep those two things separate. So it's difficult for most people psychologically, for sure.
Yes, and that's why you're often recommended not to go into business with friends
or family.
Or family, because they typically tend to not be friends anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this both on the end of as a business owner and within an organization where a person gets promoted and their friends think that they can take advantage of that position now and get out of certain responsibilities or whatnot, and that person has to rein them in. And I've only seen one instance of this where the friendship survived that, and in the other cases the friendship did not.
Yeah.
And for the exact reason you just mentioned.
Yeah. So we've talked about the male dominance hierarchy. We've talked about the two types of alpha males, the benevolent and the narcissistic. And we've gone into great depth here on giving us a profile of Donald Trump as the benevolent alpha. Now, let's get into the effect that Donald Trump's presidency, particularly his second presidency, which I has obviously differed from his first in a lot of ways. What types of effects that has had on the current zeitgeist, if we can call it that?
Well, we can see massive psychological changes in the world leaders and in their policies. People were just kind of going along, and we had the, whatever you want to call it, the globalist plan. We're just quietly going along with that, whatever. They're in what I would call almost a full-on panic. They don't want to look at it this way. They want to project it as them being forceful and powerful, but they're not. So what do we have? We have Donald Trump immediately announcing plans to acquire Greenland for the United States, both for acquisition of their massive resources and as well as a strategic military positioning for the North American continent. And that just shocked Europe, particularly Denmark, who currently is over at Greenland. But then they quickly realized if it came down to the use of force, they actually couldn't force Donald Trump to comply.
Right.
And I believe this is where we're getting a lot of the fear reaction from. There's a lot of rhetoric about how strong Europe is militarily, despite that objectively not being the case.
So
go ahead. I will say in recent years, Europe has started arming themselves more progressively. And we can get into that later, but they're not there. Yeah. And part of that is because of another aspect of Donald Trump, of him demanding that they start paying a proper share into their NATO obligations. So Europe has been resting very comfortably since the Second World War on NATO and on the United States contribution to NATO in particular, providing the majority of the money and military power to defend Europe. And so they've held what are largely token militaries, at least as far as the manpower and equipment they can immediately deploy, is very, very low. And they've been putting that money instead into these social programs, which as Americans, we've had to listen to Europeans drone on and on about how we should have, and how we're falling short of where we should be for our own people, because we should have all the free this and the free that. Well, they're doing it at the expense of being able to defend themselves. And now they're being forced to reorient their economies towards starting to build up a competent military for themselves. And we're starting to see where that's taking away from these social programs and the reeing and weeping over that from both the populace and the governments of these nations, who have essentially been, again, the European governments are very femininely minded and have kept their populations in line because they're femininely cognitive also, by simply saying, hey, we're going to take 60% of your pay and we're going to give you a bunch of free shit. So there's a bunch of feel-good measures and whatnot to keep everyone in line. And now that they have to start taking those away to defend themselves, that's a major psychological shift.
It's the tyranny of the clique. Yeah, that's how the femcogs bully and dominate the other femcogs. So, I mean, that's obviously reflected a lot of uncomfortable and even painful truths for the European powers. Now, what about the reactivity of, and I will call it reactivity and not responsiveness, of both the left and the right in the United States? Could you comment on that?
That is a very interesting topic, because you're absolutely correct in calling it reactivity, because they have no initiative whatsoever. They're completely reactive to Donald Trump. Again, being the good, as in the skilled alpha, he maintains the initiative and makes them respond to him. And part of that is his tactic of essentially just shotgunning. Every day there's 100 new things he's doing. They can only pick a few of them to react to and react to those properly. So they can't react to everything he's doing, and they can never gain an instance of initiative.
Well, that's what I mean. He always has them on the back foot. It's a reaction, not a response, because there's no agency. They can't exercise any agency. They can only react to the action that's being put to them.
Correct. So what we have here is a dichotomous response. And again, it's showing the left being more female-minded, the right being more male-minded. The left chooses tantrums and violence. Okay?
Always.
We don't like Donald Trump. We don't like Elon Musk. So we're going to burn car dealerships, deface people's personal property, have public meltdowns. Despite that being, completely ineffective, to include the Democrat members of Congress acting childishly, again, with their little auction paddles, refusing to stand and, acknowledge the boy that had brain cancer.
Yes.
Absolutely childish behavior.
Yeah, at the recent State of the Union. Yeah.
Oh, that was terrible. And, we've got
shameful is a better word. Yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely shameful. Yes. And we've got the public meltdowns we've seen from Elizabeth Warren, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, all those. And it's just completely emotion-driven and childish. The right, on the other hand, chooses extreme authoritarianism. Okay, so
right.
They want to
bullying, right? It's also a form of bullying. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's just doing it by, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to agree with the big D, and we're going to exercise authority, but we're not going to challenge anything he does. We're not even going to necessarily exercise that authority along the lines he's pushing, but we're going to use our compliance with his goals, his agenda, to grab other authorities for ourselves. So we're starting to see religious authoritarianism creeping into the political. We're starting to see authoritarianism with branches of government trying to usurp powers from other branches, particularly the judiciary trying to override both the legislative and the executive branches. So everyone's trying to grab authority, and on the right. And that is just also, like you said, it's a form of bullying. And the thing to understand is both the tantrums and the childishness of the left and the extreme authoritarianism of the right are both positions of weakness.
Correct.
They're trying to project it as strength, but it's not.
Right. These come from people who are themselves powerless and non-agential, we're going to talk about agency a lot on mind maps. Yeah. These are non-agential behaviors.
Correct. And so we have the left who've lost all credibility due to their antics over the last 3 presidencies. Obama, the Trump presidency, the Biden presidency. They've been acting like children and going with these way over the top antics and rhetoric, and they have no political or legal leg to stand on anymore. You've even got diehard Democrats that spent their entire life, voting for the party, saying we don't want anything to do with you anymore. We cannot abide this being called Democrat anymore. We have to leave the party, and that's both on the politician side and the voter side.
Yeah, Trump has been a powerful, not just force for agency, but a model of it. And this is what the father does. I know we're going to get into this, I think, in like the next part of our discussion on this episode. But he's modeling agency and he's encouraging agency. And by encouraging it, we're seeing some of these folks who are stepping away from the Democratic Party because he's given them, in a sense, he's given them permission to do so.
Absolutely. And we have to remember the people on the right now that are trying to look authoritative and agential and whatnot. These are the same people who were too cowardly to use the legal and political power that they have, even when they were in the majority, to affect any real change.
Right.
And that's because they didn't have a leader giving them a direction. So now they rally behind the will and tightly toe the line behind Donald Trump, because now he's providing them the leadership, a national father figure, if you'd like to look at it that way.
Yes.
To both claim and attempt to claim that they were part of the retaking of power and then to hold on to that power, but they weren't. This was Donald Trump himself doing that. And again, in primaries, they didn't do it too hard this time, but the first time they tried to primary against him, and the whole debacle at the end of his first presidency, the people who were signaling that, oh yeah, we're behind Donald Trump, we're on the team, were the very ones that were saying, oh yeah, nothing to see here, nothing happened, let's just keep moving on, status quo. So they're not powerful, they're not agential, they're cowardly, and now he's giving them a means and excuse to try to project that they were powerful.
Right.
So like you said, Donald Trump is the only one who's been acting in a mode of agency. And he's been forcing both his allies and his enemies to conform to his wishes. Because there's been a lot of people, even among some of his cabinet appointees, that he's had to rein in and get in line. You're going to do this. Right.
It really reflects, if I may, it really reflects the state of our society and how non-agential it has become, and for the lacking of a father figure. I mean, Donald Trump has sort of stepped in as this national father figure that we have desperately needed, and reflects for us just how absent that has been, both at the national level and at the local level, and of course it starts in the home. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. It's very much showing that we've lacked a national father figure. So even when we've had, again, a male in charge, they haven't had the father figure mentality. They haven't been the leader of the American people. They've been a political leader, they've done all that, blah, 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 but they haven't been this force behind which you can morally as well as philosophically get behind or not. But very much like, the role of the father in the house, Donald Trump is taking that role as the president. And it's very much a case of, we're seeing a lot of temper tantrums and stuff because people have been getting away with things. And now father has come home and taken the belt off. Right.
I think we had a lot of gammas in power before the arrival of the Alpha Dawn.
I think that's a good observation. Yes.
Yeah.
because that's exactly the role they're falling back into now. Is, well, I really don't have any power, but he's a dum dum. He's stupid. These policies won't work. This won't work. It's horrible, and yet they don't have any counter policies.
No, they can't provide any solutions. Yeah.
Right. So
because they have none.
Much like the old saw within whether it's business or any other decision making, a bad decision is better than no decision, and we've had a long time of no decision.
Yeah, it's even considered bad form in a lot of groups to complain. Basically just complain about a problem, but not proffer any solution.
Correct.
It's certainly not masculine. It's not behavior that men should engage in. You either come to the table with a solution or you remain silent.
And I believe the first one to say that in the political arena was Teddy Roosevelt. He told people, if you don't come to me with a problem and at least some thought as to the solution, then you're just bitching.
Right.
And, I've seen that in the corporate world too, where, okay, you're a fairly low member in the hierarchy, but if you come to your higher management and you say, look, I see this problem here, and you at least proffer some kind of solution, they're much more likely to listen to you. Most likely they'll come up with a better solution than you did, but they'll listen to you because at least you're putting enough skin in the game to try to think of how to solve the problem you see rather than just complain.
Well, and it also demonstrates that that person is thinking about the team. They're thinking about the mission and not just, well, what can I get for myself? How can I make this a better situation for myself?
Right. And wouldn't we like to see more of that from our politicians? Yes,
absolutely.
We're trying to make the United States as a whole better, not just for our career, because they don't even look at the best for their constituents anymore. It's whatever's best for them. And we need to get away from that. But so we've lacked this father figure. And what's been the result of that? Well, we end up being a nation of men raised by women, to quote Fight Club. We have weak, effeminate males who emote like females, which we at the Free Folk call the female cognitive, and who are unable and unwilling to establish order at the household level on up to the national level. So we've observed this a lot because we have, more than 50% of the households end up being single mother households because of the divorce rate. But even where the father or the husband is still present, they're not acting in the role of the father. So the children are still not getting fathered. And we come up with the same sort of results that we've come up with on the national level without a father figure.
Right.
So,
and men are the ones who are charged to solve problems. Often it is the women and the children who bring to the men their complaints and the problems that need to be solved. And men are charged with solving those problems. So when our men abandon their responsibility and start to behave like women, we are in dire straits. So the arrival of a national father figure who takes that responsibility seriously unto himself, and as I said before, is not just modeling it, but encouraging others to do the same. It's had quite an effect. But please continue on the mapping of this society that's been raised by women, the psyche of that society.
Certainly. So the counterpart to the weak, effeminate male is the overly aggressive, histrionic female, who, we've had this just society-wide, phenomenon of females behaving poorly. And it's due to being allowed to believe that there will be no consequences, which has largely been true for their actions. So again, going back to the alpha personality, this is why it's important for the father figure to not be overly influenced by other people's opinions of them. So whether it's in the home or at the top of the nation, very often the father has to be the bad guy. So he has to be the one to tell mom no. You can't, spend the mortgage money to go buy these baubles that would look nice on your shelf or whatnot. And
right, he sets
again,
limits.
any of us old people remember being told by our mothers we're misbehaving. Wait till your father gets home.
Oh yes, yes.
Because yes, he's going to reestablish the order, and there's going to be the consequences dealt out. And that was Dad's job. Dad's job was to be the bad guy.
Right.
And the female psyche does not like being the bad guy. They don't like to be thought ill of, so they tend to not implement discipline within the family. Now they may.
Well, they can't afford it. Socially, females can't afford it. They have to be liked. So
Right. So you'll see them have temper tantrums and lose control of their emotions from time to time, but that's not instilling discipline.
Right.
Which further aggravates the situation because now those who are being led have an inconsistent leadership over them.
Mm-hmm.
So the weak, effeminate men, the overly aggressive females who behave poorly lead to social degeneration. Okay, and along with that, we have the disintegration of a national identity based on emotionalism and seeking after the next dopamine hit.
Right.
So, how many people will ask, what does it even mean to be an American? And
we've lost that identity. Yeah, completely.
And if you look at Americans, that's right, we don't have an identity anymore. And a lot of the times we'll try to look back to times in the past where we had an American identity. And it's because, again, we're trying to be everyone's friend. We're trying to be part of the, quote, global village and be accepted by everyone, which means to be accepted by everyone, you have to lose your distinctive identity.
Right. We've been trying to be everybody's friend instead of everybody's father, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is the father who gives the identity. That is
right.
Critical. It is the father who gives the identity to the child, to the family, to the nation.
And we have this, problem of the other nations of the world essentially expecting America to be the world police, but then they get upset when, okay, we're spending our money and more importantly, our lives establishing an order in a country or doing this or whatever, negotiating between these parties, whatever. And then they get upset because we impose our view of what should be happening, of how things should be carried on from there. Well, that's part of being the father figure is, yes, you establish order, you come home, the kids are unruly. Okay, everyone gets their spanking. You get all lined up. This is the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. So they want us to protect them, and this is the other nations of the world. They want us to protect them from the consequences of being undisciplined. But then when we want to establish discipline, they get upset. Well, what gives you the right? Well, what gives us the right is we're the ones who established the order.
Right.
Okay. So the establisher of the order is the one who gets to determine what that order looks like.
In other words, the insurer, right? The one who insures the society, the capital stock of the society, that sort of thing. They're the ones who have the authority because they are the insurers. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we've got the common saw, and we're not going to get into who's on the right side or whatnot of particularly like Europeans. Why do we have to come to these, negotiatings, these big, G whatever summits and speak English? And the response being, because over the course of 2 world wars, we kept you from having to speak German.
Mm-hmm.
So again, bailed Europe out of 2 world wars where they would have had to, quote, speak German or Russian after the Second World War. We prevented that. So yeah, we get to lay the ground rules and you speak the language we speak. That's the way it is.
Yeah. We're about an hour into our discussion. I want to make sure that we cover everything that we wanted to cover today. So I'm just going to ask that we very briefly go over what you see as the effects, both desirable and undesirable, of the coming of Donald Trump and all that he brings as the quintessential alpha don.
Absolutely. We can go through that quickly. And, these are also subjects that are going to be brought up in a more broader venue within our further podcast. So we don't need to go into excruciating detail. I want the audience to understand we're talking specifically effects of the alpha don being Donald Trump, not just the alpha in general.
Right.
So this does not apply to all alphas. So first of all, what I see as desirable effects, and this is looking kind of from an objective overview. Okay. First of all, he establishes order where there's the absence of it. Okay. The United States have been very chaotic over the last few administrations. Boom, he's establishing order, whether you like it or not. Whether you like the order or not, he establishes it. He's provoking those with a dysfunctional, underdeveloped, even childish psyche to behave in ways that betray themselves and compel reciprocity, which can sometimes be harsh and punitive. So he's basically the people who can't control themselves, they have low personal control. It's basically provoking them to act out and show their hand, which can then be dealt with on a legal or otherwise basis.
This is exactly what a father would do with a small child, a toddler who is not yet able to regulate their emotions.
Correct.
Yeah.
It brings to light the lack of a strong male figure and a complete lack of alpha figures, not only at the presidential levels, but at the higher levels of government. So whether it's heads of bureaus, Congress, the judiciary, whatnot, we've lacked alpha males in all of these, not just the presidency. And this is showing a stark contrast between an alpha leader and what we've been stuck with.
And this has been going on, at least I think for the entirety of our lifetimes, so.
The closest thing we had to a genuine alpha, leader in our lifetimes would have been Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
And he just kind of barely qualifies.
Yeah.
Now, it also highlights the effect of the pathological feminine influence that has been increasingly dominating over the last century. It began with the suffragettes and the imposition of the Volstead Act, which is prohibition, and the continual just disruption of the political
and encroachment
scene.
Yes,
an encroachment on by the pathological feminine. And okay, not every feminine mind is pathological, but the problem is the pathological seek power. They seek these positions where they can do this this undermining and this degeneration of society.
Right.
It allows the aforementioned dysfunctional and emotionally dysregulated psyches to persist into adulthood rather than allowing for a father figure to set limits and order in the child's life. And we see this also at the national level, where we're getting people who were irresponsible in their life, who are now in positions of power and are still, they're dysregulated, they're dysfunctional, but now they can do some real damage. We're looking at you, AOC. Okay.
Good example.
Who's known for her tantrums, the wide-eyed rants and whatnot. That's a person who has no business being in that position. Whether she was male or female, it doesn't matter. That is a dysregulated psyche and does not belong in power. And I think, a lot of this began after the Second World War, where large numbers of men, were coming back from the Second World War. They're damaged, they're broken. They don't want to constantly fight over everything in their life. So they largely allowed the wives to run the house and raise the children, which gave us the baby boomers, which was the first generation that was raised by what were effectively, if not actually, single mothers.
Right.
And, that's had wide-ranging consequences for the ongoing decades, because we got the divorce Olympics by the boomers, which Gen X isn't quite as bad on. The millennials are trying to beat them at the divorce Olympics. And so, we've got the helicopter parenting, the rise of the single mother, and the lack of direction in the household has really been degenerative. And, one of the positive effects of having a national father figure is we're starting to look more for, okay, we need father figures in the home too, because we like this establishing of orders, and we need to do this at all levels of society.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a talk for another episode, but statistically, the home, the worst home that a child can be in is a single mother home. I mean, that has now been proven.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Yeah.
Yes, both when in terms of violence and in terms of the outcome for the child.
Oh yeah.
And then the other, primarily desirable effect I can see is this reduces and possibly eliminates a lot of the gynarchy that's permeated society, such as these HR departments that are absolutely out of control, EEI and other discriminatory policies, and the histrionics by those that are convinced that these expressions afford necessary safety nets. So, they think this is a social safety net, and that's meritocracy and simply going with the best person, regardless of gender, race, or whatnot, is inherently somehow discriminatory, which is it's a deranged outlook.
This has no place in business. Yeah, it's no place in business.
Right. So moving on quickly to some of the undesirable effects of the coming of the Alpha Dawn. So, we're not totally on board with everything that the Alpha Dawn's doing, and nobody is. Nobody 100% agrees with anybody. So let's establish that anyway.
Yeah, and these are observations we're making. We're just mapping here. We're not saying that we're on one side or another side or any side really. We're just making psychological and spiritual and social observations.
Right. And we're also intellectually honest enough to admit that no matter how objective we try to be, we do have a bias. Everybody does. So one of the primary negative effects I see is that this forces everybody to get in line with his agenda, despite any objections, legitimate or not. And part of this, honestly, is just, I think he's seen how far people are willing to go to oppose him, all the way to the point of killing him. And he is not open to negotiation. He has his agenda. And, to use the colloquialism, he gives no fucks. Okay. You've shot your load. You've done as much as you can to, counter him, to oppose him, including the most extreme things. And now he is going to do what he plans on doing, and part of that is because of his perception that he has stated over and over again, that he believes that his God saved him to implement his agenda. So you have that, okay? That's a negative. There's legitimate moral obligations to his blind loyalty to Israel, both were the continuing Palestinian genocide, which he seems to have no interest in alleviating, saving, moving them all out of there to another nation and making beachfront hotel properties out of Palestine. And the fact that he seems to put Israel first, not America first. So whenever there's a policy to be made in Israel's favor that's not particularly in America's favor, he implements the policy to favor Israel.
That is a disappointment. Yeah, that is a disappointment to many. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And here's a big thing about this one that's very important to take note of, is this objection crosses political lines. We have opponents from all corners who disagree with him on this issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are objections from conservatives for him, like the recent attacks on the Houthis in Yemen, when he's clearing what is primarily a European shipping lane. I think something like less than 5% of American shipping goes through there. Rather than letting Europe do so or not do so. And we understand why Europe probably can't project power that far to do it. So he's still kind of being allies to our European allies. But again, conservatives want an America first objective, and here we are putting ourselves into the line of fire, making enemies, and expending resources to defend what's basically somebody else's interest.
Right.
Then we come to the Russia-Ukraine issue, where we have things like he's signaling solidarity with Starmer in the UK and backing them against Russia if Russia attacked them. And yet here we have the UK and the EU who seem to be trying to trigger direct hot war with Russia, which is asinine from their perspective. And this bothers both the political right and the political left, who claim he's still in collusion with Russia.
The left is claiming that, right?
The left is claiming, yes, that he is in collusion with Russia. So it's like they pick completely opposite views of why they don't like it, but still neither side really likes the way he's handling the Russia-Ukraine situation.
Well, that's telling. Yeah, that's telling.
It does. And the fact that his political opponents tried to murder him, again, makes him less apt to listen to any advice given. And I can't really blame him on that, because at the end of the day, we can talk about archetypes and all this, but he is human.
Sure.
And like I said, he thinks that his God saved him to implement the agenda that he's had this whole time. And people who think that they have a mandate from a higher power to implement a personal agenda can be extraordinarily dangerous. And we have to keep that in mind.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say he thinks that. He believes that. That's his assertion.
Yeah. Yeah, we can argue whether think.
You know me. I'm
apropos on that, but yes. I don't think he's coming at it from an emotional point of view. Is what I'm getting at.
No. It's a belief, though. It's a belief.
Yeah, and he's making his rationalizations based on that belief. So, yeah,
correct.
Belief is probably the better word to use.
Correct.
So, that's the basic rundown of this. Yeah, no,
this has been great. So I just have a couple of questions because you really took the lead on this one. So where do you think we are? I'm going to take us into some philosophy right now. Where do you think we are on Plato's cycle of decline of the regimes? I mean, it seems to me, and you tell me if you agree with this, that Trump sort of signals that we're in a shift, that we're moving from democracy into tyranny. For those who are not familiar, the cycle of the 5 regimes from Plato's Republic, it starts at aristocracy and then it declines, degenerates down through timocracy, oligarchy, democracy, and then tyranny. Where do you think we are there?
Okay, I would say that we're still in the democracy stage.
Okay.
And I think we're coming very close to the shift into the tyranny stage, because people need to remember one of the reasons that Plato and even the founding fathers of the U.S. did not like democracy is because that's just tyranny of the masses.
Right.
So moving from democracy to tyranny, or I've heard other people say despotism, is you're going from a tyranny of the masses to a tyranny of one.
Of the one.
And this is part of the cycle of, we can go from the ages too, the golden age, silver age, all that, all the way down. And before you can make that turn back to the golden age or whatnot, is you do have the rise of the figure called the tyrant. Now, whether Donald Trump fits the tyrant archetype or not within this depends on a few factors. Most notably, he's putting out a lot of rhetoric. He's making a lot of executive orders that only hold within the executive branch. So it's really the boss telling the people in the executive branch what to do. If he implements these and makes them law through using the Congress and the legislation, and does some of the enforcement that he's talked about, including using military assets to put down the seditious behavior that's been going on with state governments and whatnot, then we can say that we have made that shift from the end of democracy into tyranny. But it really depends on what his actions are from here on out, if we're still at the end of democracy or if we're at the beginning of the tyranny.
Yeah. And what people have to understand and appreciate is this is a natural phenomenon that we are observing here. Nature strives for balance always. So this is nature trying to make a correction. Okay. So we're just seeing cause and effect here. We've had the pendulum swing far in one extreme, and now that's created an equal and opposite reaction to pull it back in the other direction. I'm just curious what this is going to mean, for the long haul. Like, obviously Donald Trump, the Alpha Don phenomenon, he is a psychosocial and psychospiritual juggernaut, the effects of which are reshaping the landscape of American society, business, politics, and that of the world, it could be argued. The question is, in the end, will we achieve the balance that Aristotle cites as the good being the mean between two extremes, or are we now moving into a male tyranny versus the female tyranny that really we've been under here for quite some time now? I'm going to ask the audience to give their thoughts in the comments below. I mean, I'd like to hear your comments, but I also want to hear their comments at the end. We probably should wrap up soon, but go ahead and give us your thoughts, Ulf.
Well, in short, it is unfortunately, as the description goes, it's a pendulum swing. Mm-hmm. So it swings one way, it's going to swing the other way, and the further it swings in one direction, the further it swings back in the other. So unfortunately, I think we are going to swing into a strong male tyranny to counteract the female tyranny that we've been under, and we've seen this, throughout history, typically towards the degeneration of a civilization or whatnot. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of what we're seeing with the female psyche gaining political power and whatnot. And then generally when that falls, then you see a strong male tyrant come in, establish order, and begin, the sort of golden age of the next civilization that's coming after that. And I think we're going to see that again. I think it's unavoidable. It is unfortunate to go between either extreme. I'm one of these. I prefer the Aristotelian mean, so you're not unbalanced in either direction, because going from a female tyranny to a male tyranny is going to also be unbalanced, which is going to require a correction. And we only get that sweet spot at the bottom of the pendulum swing for short periods of time between these two swings.
Right.
And I'm not sure if there's a way to avoid that.
Right. A tyranny is still a tyranny, whether it's male or female. And we are free folk, so we prefer to live in the mean wherever and as much as possible. I think that about wraps it up for this edition of Mind Maps. Please do give us your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you think we're heading with the Alpha Dawn phenomenon. Thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next week. We'll be mapping the psychology of the political left and the political right. And to all our agents out there in the field, farewell, hold your purpose, and may the blessings of all free folk go with you. This is Two Wolf Crew signing off.
Get to the extraction point.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Mind Maps. If you found the content of this episode of value, please be sure to give it a like and share it on your social media networks. To be notified of future episodes, subscribe to Mind Maps on your favorite platform. This helps the podcast to grow and reach more listeners. Your feedback is important to us. Please let us know your thoughts on today's episode in the comments below, or drop us a line at freefolk.org/contact. Until next time, navigators, fly free.
You're on your own. Good luck.